Just want to say a huge thank you for joining us all here today and tonight, really, because obviously it's now 5 o'clock, and particularly given the glorious weather that we're all experiencing, and the fact that you are all willing to still join us for this session is brilliant. So thank you. I'm Rachel Bickerstaff, so I lead our diversity inclusion agenda for Co-op, and we've got a really packed agenda for you this evening, and hopefully to be able to give you some real insight in terms of some of the work that we're doing, and I'm joined by my amazing colleagues who are amazing, by the way, Elaine, Dwight and Rue, and also by our keynote speaker John, who's also going to share some insight with you. So we do have quite a speedy agenda to kind of get through before sort of 6 o'clock, so really just wanted to say thank you for joining us and hope you enjoy the session, and I will be back soon. Thank you. I'll hand across to John.
Mute. I was looking at something else at the time. Sorry. So, hello everybody. I hope you'll interact. Listen, I know there's really good reasons why people don't show their faces, and maybe this is convention with you lot. If it's convenient, whatever, and safe, please do show your faces. It's always nice to see the tiles of folk. So I know that this is kind of a mixed bag, and the problem I've got is that I was just upstairs in the sunshine, grabbing a brief moment, and I realized I wanted to say like 1,000 different things, and so I don't know how I'm going to get everything in the time that I've got, but this is what I want to say to you first. This network of people, Black and brown people, all kinds of different people. The world is not made for us weirdos, but you are not broken. I know that each of us, we kind of know this, but everywhere you turn, there is some indication or some suggestion that we are not enough, that we are broken. This is not even just about protected categories. There are people on this call and in the world who look like they should be the most mainstream and have a part of them that they can never share, or that they worry will diminish them in the eyes of others. It's been an exhausting year. It's been an exhausting year for everybody with COVID. One of my day jobs is that I'm a non-executive director, so non-clinical in the NHS. The country's largest trust, which is in Manchester, by the way, not in London, just so people know. Manchester's it's up north, for those of you who are Southerners, just to let you know. And the work that's been done there by others, not me, is remarkable, but it's been exhausting for everybody. And then on top of this, we have the last 332 days since George Floyd's murder. And we suddenly, not necessarily us in this room, but people suddenly realized racism existed, despite what reports might have you believe. And so I know that many of you will feel like a squeezed orange with not another drop to give. So the first thing I'm saying is that you have to take care of yourself. If you want to achieve remarkable things, if you want to support others, you have to take care of yourself. There's this brilliant proverb, and depending on where you look, some people say it's Arabic, some people say it's Mandarin, some people say it's something else, but it says you can't pour from an empty cup. So I've been telling everybody who listens to me, you have got to fill your cup. This is not selfish, this is self-care, this is smart. You've got to find ways to recuperate, and that isn't the same as falling into your couch and falling asleep in front of Netflix. That's not the same. It's not the same as coming home so exhausted that you grab something bad to eat and then suddenly are jolted out just in time for work the next day. You've got to find ways to actually recuperate. Otherwise, you will not be able to do the remarkable things that you should. I'm a very practical, no, direct person. as a psychologist, we have a number of duties, and two of them are this. One of them is a duty of candor. So if you ask me a question, I will answer it as candidly as I can. And if I don't know the answer, I'll say, I don't know. Might give you a best guess. Then there's a duty of care, which I have for all of us in this room. Here's my first direct bit on how we get more leaders. And these are some of the things that I've learned, and there's some of the things that smart people have taught me. Here's a question that I ask myself every single day. Do I want to win, or do I want to be right? I ask myself this question every day. Every person who is different, who doesn't quite fit in, who is not the norm for your organization for one reason or another, maybe you're an introvert in an environment of extroverts, doesn't really matter. You have to constantly ask yourself the question, do I want to win, or do I want to be right? I want to win. People who are going to thrive and succeed have to want to win more than they want to be right. This is awful. It feels terrible. It feels Machiavellian. It feels unnecessarily energy expensive, and it is all those things. I talk to people about crow and capital. Eating crow, I've discovered, is a particularly old-fashioned phrase, and maybe even a northern old-fashioned phrase. And so not many people know about it, but eating crow is the idea that you know, when you've had a great idea, I'm sure this will not apply to any of you in the room. You've had a great idea and someone's stolen it. And you sit in the meeting, and instead of saying, "Oi, jerk, that's my idea," you input to it as if it's not. No woman in this room knows what that means. That's eating crow. Maybe there's only one person in that room, the person who stole your idea, who knows what you've done. But what you do by eating crow is you build capital. And capital is what you can spend on stuff. You eat enough crow, you end up with some capital, and you can decide how you're going to use it. And you have to decide really judiciously, because once it's gone, you have to build it up again. This is the nature of things. And I know that it seems like this is the kind of thing that only the most lowly, the most junior people have to worry about, but I am still doing it today. Still doing it now, and I have a feeling, I'm 50, I have a feeling I'll be doing it until the day I die. Eating crow to build capital, to spend on the things that I think are really important. Crow and capital. Just consider that in your conversations with people, because many of them will be frustrating, and you know that not everybody has your best interests at heart. How can you strategically, this is not about just lying back and taking whatever people give to you. I am nobody's pushover. But it's about thinking strategically about the things you do not say, about the comments you do not make, about the allowances that you give in order to build up real capital that gives you an opportunity later on down the road, and spending it really judiciously. That's the first thing I've learned that I thought was kind of interesting and important, and I'll happily take questions on it when it comes time. The other thing that I'll say to you, and I haven't really found a better way to say it than this, so just excuse the bad language. Humility is bullshit. I know that a lot of Black and brown families grow up with parents, especially Black and brown, but lots of families grow up with parents who hammer into them this idea that you must be humble. Humility is bullshit. A person must be able to accurately self-evaluate. It is essential. Do not lie about skills that you do not have. Do not pretend you can do something you cannot. But equally, do not lie to diminish or erase skills that you do have. That is the same kind of lie. And there are people in workplaces who are not fazed by lying about skills that they do not have. So you cannot be the kind of person that makes them look even better by lying about skills that you do have. I am never shy to tell people what I'm good at. It feels really cringy the first time you do it. And I'm not talking about like bragging. I'm not talking about being one of those people that's constantly spouting off about who you know. And I'm talking about an accurate evaluation. If you're excellent at something, Help people around you to know that you're excellent at it. Do not lie. The biggest key that I've had to any kind of success that I've had is mostly lessons from my mother. I'm sure for many of you, you will feel similarly. I just need to tell you right now that my mum's better than your mum. I used to play some sport, but I didn't start till very late, till I was 17. I started at 17 and I was terrible because my entire youth consisted of reading science fiction books and eating Greggs steak slices. That was pretty much my existence growing up. It's pretty much my existence now. And so when I started to play basketball, I wanted to tell my mum, she was a doctor in Cheadle, Heel Green, and I wanted to tell my mum that I was going to play in the NBA, which is a big league in America. And I'd been playing for about 6 months and I was terrible. And I went into her room one night when she was exhausted and trying to rest. And I told her I'm going to play in the NBA. I had to explain to her what the NBA was. And she looked at me and she said, "That sounds challenging." And I said, well, and I explained to her how it happened. I'd get recruited by somebody in America. I'd play in college. I'd get a huge contract. I could see she wasn't convinced, so I tried to sweeten the pot by telling her, "And I'll buy you a house." And she looked at me and she said, "Son, would you recognize your soul in the dark?" I was 17 at the time. So frustrating. That's not the answer I was looking for. Didn't make any sense. We didn't even go to church. And she said, "Son, when people set out to do something remarkable, they have to know who they are so that they don't self-sabotage, so that they know that their assets and what the things that they can to leverage for it." Said, most people wouldn't recognize their characteristics if they didn't have something to work off. You couldn't, when you ask people to describe themselves, they most often say, "I'm a mother, brother, son." You talk about your relationships, you talk about your job description, you talk about your height and your looks. And you realize very quickly that when you strip that away, most people don't have a clue who they are. And knowing who you are is hugely valuable. My mother helped me understand that I am lazy. This is a fixed trait for me, and it has not changed. I am incredibly lazy. And learning that was the key. I realized that if given a choice between steak slice and running on a treadmill, I will take steak slice. But knowing that allowed me to create strategies that meant that I could end up as a professional athlete. Ridiculous. And I know that some of you will be thinking, if you know, I'm 6'9", so you'll be thinking, of course you ended up in the NBA. I just need to remind you that there's lots of 6'9" guys working at Subway. Having one outstanding characteristic, whether it's your intellect or your height, is rarely enough to get you to the top of anything. Understand who you are. I'm a geek and a nerd. I like Star Wars and Doctor Who. I have a collection of replica lightsabers that cost more than I'm willing to share. This is who I am. And knowing this allows me to navigate the world, I think, better. But most people don't spend the time. My mom always, she told me, she's like, most people spend their entire life trying to figure out what they're going to do and no time trying to understand who they are. Spend some time trying to understand who you are. And that will help you understand and at least ensure that what you end up doing is what you really want to be doing. I was never a basketball player. I was a psychologist who played basketball. And here I am now doing the job that I always wanted to do, with a hand up from putting a ball in a hole for a living for a decade or so. As much as it's important to know who you are, you've got to know how you're seen. There's a psychologist, really old psychology, 1902, he's called Charles Cooley. He came up with something called the looking glass self. The idea that our identity is not something that just kind of percolates up inside us and then one day, ta-da, we know who we are. Or even it's not something that we just think about and kind of understand. But actually, our identity is also, or at least our reflections on it, is made up of how we see ourselves reflected in the faces of the people around us. I've known that I'm a monster since I was 7 years old. I knew this from the day probably when I was 11, and I realized that people wouldn't stand with me in a bus shelter, even if it was raining. I realize when I see the terror on people's faces. I realize when I stand in a lift with a man and he puts his hand on his wallet. And I stand in the lift with a woman and she takes her handbag from the shoulder closest to me and puts it on the shoulder furthest away. I am a monster in the eyes of people. And as annoying as it is, I have to accommodate for that, so that they can also learn that I'm a geek and a nerd. Knowing who you are is essential. Knowing how other people see you is important. And I know for some of you in the room, this is a ridiculous statement because you live a life knowing how other people see you. But the thing to recognize is just because people reflect back these horrible things, all we have to acknowledge is it's what they see. You don't have to acknowledge it as truth. There's 1,000 other things that I want to talk about, and I'm trying to skipping through now because I want to get to your questions. But here are some of the things I think are important. People always talk about imposter syndrome, and I know that many of you will experience that. I do. It's a real thing, but I went to a conference about 5 years ago, and an immensely smart lecturer from University of Leeds, I caught the very end of her session, and I wish I caught it all, but I caught the end of her session. And she started she finished her session, sorry, with saying that just never forget that imposter syndrome isn't an individual pathology. It's not something wrong with you. She said, it's exactly how you're supposed to feel. It's how people want you to feel. Make you uncertain, make you unsure. And you can imagine that reflection of how people want you to see, the toxicity you feel in an environment when you try something that nobody like you has tried, or you say something in a room where nobody like you has said something. Imposter syndrome creates this voice in our head. I don't know if you have one that's quite as strident as the one in mine, but that voice in your head that tells you you look bad and you look ugly and you look stupid and you'll make a mistake and you'll never win and you can't do it. That voice in your head is the amalgamation of experiences you have in your life, looks that people give you on the street and in the office and on Teams or Zoom. And you have to treat it differently. It's in your head, but it's not you. Back in the medieval times, they came up with this idea of the homunculus. That's it was a picture of a man. If you ever look it up, it's a picture of a man, of course, inside the head of people, driving you. Because even back then, they're aware that there's a voice in your head that's not you. But you have to treat it differently. And this is the strategy that I've taken with mine. If any one of you was on the street and somebody from across the street, a stranger, yelled over to you and said something, I don't know, uncomplimentary, would you, to that person who yelled at you across the street, say, oh, actually, yes, that's a good point. These jeans are too tight? No. If they yelled, you're stupid, you couldn't possibly win at this next pitch, would you listen? No, because it's a heckler. And that's exactly what the voice in your head is. It's a heckler. So treat the voice in your head like a heckler. You can start asking questions of it because it's there. Questions like, is what you said actually accurate? You're so stupid. You've never won anything. Is that actually accurate? No, not feedback. Toss it out. Is it shared? And I don't mean by random people, because I know people love the idea of the wisdom of crowds, but crowds beyond the size of about 20 who are non-expert, according to the research, are actually really dumb. But is it shared by experts, people who actually know your business and your industry and? And if it's not, toss it out. It's a heckler. The last one's really important, the last question you can ask. Is the voice in your head saying something cruel? Feedback is never cruel. Feedback is never cruel. That does not mean that you will not hear feedback that hurts you. When somebody tells you about a presentation you did that wasn't as good as it should have been, that hurts. But cruelty is different. The purposeful wounding. Whether it's a real person or the voice in your head, if what you're hearing is cruel, it's not feedback. And lots of people will tell you, well, you've got to take the good from it. I say that we are in 2021, and at this stage, leaders should be able to give better feedback. There are enough guides out there, for crying out loud. You've got to be able to assess your own performance objectively. My team and I, for everything we do, we use 4 questions that we ask after anybody does anything. We ask them to evaluate themselves first before anybody weighs in with any additional feedback. Here are 4 questions, and I think it's a really good process. And then I think it might be a good idea for me to try and address some of the questions I see piling in. This really good process, I think, anyway. Here are the 4 questions. What went well? Specifically and objectively, what went well? That was in your control. So if you lost your internet connection or the sound went off, that's not in your control. Even better if is the second question. What would have made what you did even better for you to evaluate yourself? What did you learn from this experience or interaction? And what actions are you going to take based on what went well and even better if and the learnings? What went well, even better if, learnings, actions. It's not kind of trademarked. I think it's just something that's out there as a methodology, but it's a really good way to understand yourself better and more objectively. And by the way, anybody on the panel, if it's time for me to shut up, just shut me up. I have 1,000 things that I've been writing down, so I'm just going to keep going till not. Things that you need to know. Personality testing is bullshit. Categorically, the only factor in personality testing that has any reference for future performance is the thing that we call conscientiousness. But the whole red, green, MBTI stuff, it's not real. It doesn't determine who you are. I am an extreme introvert. I find people energy expensive, but worth it. Being an introvert doesn't mean you can't talk to groups of people. It doesn't mean you can't put together a sentence. It doesn't mean you need help putting your hand up in a room. It just means that all of that stuff takes more energy than for somebody else who might gain it. But what you probably don't know is that the MBTI, pulled together by the mother and daughter team who did, their initial testing was on all the people who lived in their street, an exclusively white neighborhood. You probably don't know that Elizabeth Myers said that it wasn't worth giving Black people personality testing because their IQ wasn't high enough. You probably don't know that up until very recently, Hogan's Norm Group was C-suite executives from America, which meant that they were straight, white, older men. And so anytime you compare anybody against that, you're going to come off different. I've got this bloke who's a cisgendered straight white man who I've been coaching. He's a C-suite exec in the FTSE now, but only after a battle against Hogan, because they said he was an introvert. And of course, introverts can't lead. how could they lead? You know, they'd never be able to speak, right? It's not real. Don't let people tell you who you are. That's why it's so important for you to do this work. Figure out for yourself who you are, what people see when they look at you, and navigate that by eating some crow and spending capital judiciously. Other things that I think are important for me that have really helped. I have created and curated a cabinet. So I have friends, this may shock and alarm you. I have friends, it is a small number of people I would trust with my life. And some of this cabinet are also, they have become friends, but your cabinet is something different. Your cabinet is a group of people that you use to bounce your risky ideas off. Even things like, I'm having this situation at work, I'm planning on doing this action. You ask the members of your cabinet to gather this, and they know what their role is. You define their expectations. They're people that you can always rely on for absolute candor, specific, objective candor. In my cabinet, I have someone older and unrelated in the workforce. He's a former teacher who lives in Portland, Oregon. I've got someone who's older, who has worked in, he's a psychologist and has worked in this industry in business for years and years and years and is retired and has seen it all. I've got someone younger who people probably think is my mentee, but is a member of my cabinet because they are wise and smart and more often than I prefer, tell me things that I should already know. Have somebody on your cabinet who is related to you and loves you. I say related to and loves you because many people have siblings who are their friends, and some people have siblings who they love, but who are not their friends. Have somebody on your cabinet who is unrelated, but loves you. Somebody who's at a similar stage who you might always think of, might even think of as a competitor, somebody like that. Make sure that this is a diverse group of people. For those of you who are Black or brown, it's sometimes tempting to think that nobody else will understand my experience. I've felt that way. But it's better to have that rounded view. And for those of you who aren't straight white men, you may find that your natural group of people who you can lean on is not as diverse as you might like. So you have to reach out. Tell people exactly what you're trying to do. Make sure that they understand it's reciprocal. It's not just a one-way relationship. These cabinets will evolve as you evolve. But having this group of people is essential. I would not be where I am without this evolving group of people over the last 10 years who have been remarkable. So there's about 10 questions now, so I thought, and a hand up, so I'll shut up. I have more.
No, thank you, John. And the only reason I didn't want to interrupt your flow, because I know everybody will really value everything that you're talking to. I'm just incredibly mindful of time, just in terms of the other things. So there are some really interesting questions that have come in on the chat. So I don't know whether you want me just to kind of pick a couple, or do you want to just, have you seen the ones you kind of talk
I will take a peek now, but by all means, if you've got one or two to kick us off, that'd be great.
Yeah. So there's a really interesting question about how do we navigate the tension between encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work versus knowing that there are parts of us all that aren't very nice and could risk making other people feel that they don't belong or can't be themselves?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I have a general don't be a jerk at work type of policy anyway. But I generally think that people's identity doesn't make them terrible or uncivil. So, for example, I'm an atheist and I am anti-Islamophobia. I am anti-Semitism, and I do that with no challenge whatsoever. I can bring myself to work without wanting to denigrate people who find a certain religious text or a certain faith pathway valuable. I've been to every kind of church, temple, mosque, you name it, I've been there. And I'll be honest, every time I go, all I look at, and I think this is good therapy. You watch people's faces when they leave these spaces, the smile, the kind of relief, the joy, the something else. And it's like, I know that the narrative behind it isn't for me, but what kind of monster would deprive that person of that experience? So you can bring yourself to work without it, rubbing up. I think people often think like faith communities and the LGBT community, they can never mix, and that's not true. You can be the kind of person that says the dignity of all people is prime. And whatever the identity, if you undermine that dignity, not only are you a threat to my community, you are a threat eventually to me. And I will fight that.
Thanks, John. Thank you. There's just time for one last question, if that's okay. So how do you find out who you are when there are so many narratives and programs telling you who you are and who you are not? And what practical suggestions do you have to get back to self when the world feels rigged against you?
So there's an exercise, there's a soul in the dark exercise. And I'll give you a really quick summary. I'm sorry that I've nattered on for too long to answer your questions. I do apologize. I get that way. So there's a number of things you can do. Your cabinet can help you. As they get to know you, your cabinet will tell you about your tendencies in a really objective way. That's important. But you can also do the exercise, right? So if someone asked you to describe yourself, write that down. Put a bubble with you in the middle, and then start writing things that you think are important. Mom, the LBG, sorry, maybe you're gay, maybe you're something else, whatever it is, but just keep writing it. And then at the end of that process, I want you to take away everything that's a relationship. I want you to take everything away that's a protected category. And I want you to take everything away that's kind of basic likes and don't likes, like peanut butter or shellfish. Take that away and then see what you're left with. If you're like me when I first did this process, you're not left with much. And that's when you start, because now you realize that's the soul in the dark part. It's now dark. And you suddenly realize that with one word there, you're not really distinguishable from anybody else around you, perhaps. I'm a nerd. I'm intrepid. I'm reliable. I'm ambitious. I'm deeply outcome focused, self-aware, authentic, consistent. Perspicacity. A mind that is decent at being incisive. I love Star Wars. That one doesn't count. But these are the things that you can start to understand the core. When you do that, you suddenly realize certain types of, you suddenly look at your job and you're like, this is not the person who should be in this job. Like when I read the words for me, it's like a psychologist who does work with research and with real people. It's like, this is who I am. Do that work. Ask people to be objective, learn from your feedback and use that to help you picture who you are.
Thanks, John. I could listen to you all evening. I know whenever I listen to you, I just think I could just listen to you forever. So thank you. And, I'm sure it's been as inspirational for everybody else on the call as it has been for me personally. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared. We're going to move on to sort of the next part of the session. So our panel that you're going to meet shortly have been instrumental actually in terms of some of the work that we've been doing here at the Co-op. So one of the things that we kind of sort of committed to on the back of actually coming out with our commitments for racial equality back in September was how we would really shift our leadership representation from sort of 3% as it currently is at the moment to 6% minimum by the end of sort of 2022. And we recognise that we've got work to do in terms of recruitment. So actually, how do we bring individuals into the organisation that are representative and that can operate at leadership level, but also that we've got some incredibly talented colleagues in our organisation, and how do we ensure that actually those colleagues have the opportunity to develop their career kind of in the co-op, because that's really important for us as an organisation, and it's really important for us to be able to support those individuals. But rather than me tell you a little bit around the sort of some of the things that we've got going on, I wanted to kind of give the opportunity really for our panel to kind of talk to you a little bit more about the things that they've been involved in, and why this work has been so important to us as a co-op. So without further ado, I am going to hand across to Rue, Elaine and Dwight to tell you a little bit more of the types of things that we've been doing here. Please, as always, pop your questions in the chat, because we'll make sure that we get the opportunity to ask those questions. And because it's a panel, we're hopefully going to do it a little bit more interactively. And I'm hoping that I'm not going to put Elaine and Rue and Dwight too much on the spot by asking some left field questions. But obviously, hopefully, we will get some really good conversation happening. So, Rue, do you want to just sort of introduce yourself first, and then before you pass across to Elaine, then just to sort of gradually do that introduction?
Absolutely, Rachel. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. My name is Ruwaida, but everybody calls me Rue. I am an inclusion manager here at Co-op, and I've been with the cooperative for just what's coming up to 14 years. Great 14 years of my life. That's me.
Thanks, Rue. Elaine?
Hi, everyone. So my name's Elaine Codrington. I am the planning lead for the funeral care business within Co-op, and I've been with Co-op now for 4 years.
Thank you. And Dwight?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Dwight, and I'm an area manager for the Co-op, and I've been with Co-op now for only 6 months. But prior to that, an area manager in Sainsbury's, Iceland and Costa.
Thank you. Right, so we'll kick off with the panel questions then. So we've got 3 topics that we're going to kind of talk about. So Rue, I'm going to come to you first in terms of why did Co-op need to take action and create what we've now called the sort of Advancing Diverse Talent Programme?
Great question, Rachel. So we acted because it's what our colleagues wanted from us, and as a business we've listened to our colleagues really. So back in 2019 we commissioned and carried out an internal end-to-end colleague lifecycle audit. Between 2019 and the beginning of 2020 we also held a number of colleague hackathons, which are essentially idea generation events. All of the insight really gathered from these hackathons and the audit really told us that our Black, Asian, minority ethnic colleagues wanted a talent program, wanted a talent acceleration program specific to them. The insight really told us that our BAME colleagues felt that, you know, development programs seemed to favor white colleagues, and this put them off from applying in the first place. They didn't see anyone that looked like them at a leadership level. And some of the other things that sort of came up from those insights were around these colleagues felt that barriers to their progression weren't really understood or investigated, whilst others really sort of felt that they couldn't, you know, get through those so-called glass ceilings. So we didn't really stop there as well. We didn't just want to sort of like just stick to the internal insight. We also did some of our own external insight or research to really gauge what other Black and Brown colleagues or employees were feeling elsewhere external to us. And I felt that, you know, there was a common theme that emerged from these insights. And this common theme was around, you know, a disconnect, I would say, where the disconnect between where the business was or where the business thought they were versus a daily colleague experience. And for me, this disconnect really wasn't new. And we should not be surprised that there is a disconnect, because I always think that talent programs, you know, selection criteria, development programs were designed, approved, and implemented without really having any sort of inclusion lens on it, or even thinking about how, you know, having a diverse set pool of talent would be or could be good for business. So, but as I said before, I've been with the Co-op now for what's coming up to 14 years. And what I really love about our business is how it values our colleagues, our feedback, and how authentically really is trying to sort of understand, where those racial disparities exist within our policies and processes, and really sort of like committed to working towards those changes as well. And also, it is also key, I guess, for me to sort of add that, I've also seen the frustrations caused by simply just gathering feedback after feedback, or running, listening circles after another, really asking colleagues about their experiences and not really doing anything with it. The difference that I see and I feel within our Co-op and our leaders is that they take all of that actions and all of those feedback and those data, or whatever you want to call it, really, and took action as a result. They're actually doing something about it. This is why advancing diverse talent was really sort of core deliverable at the beginning of 2020, and I kind of wanted to sort of like make sure that that was key, because obviously post March of last year, everything sort of that happened, the tragic killing of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, our racial commitments, that sort of accelerated everything. But I just wanted everybody to sort of know that this was already in our plans. It wasn't something that came about as a result of everything else that happened post-March. And it's also sort of really important for me to sort of say that, we've never really offered a program or a talent acceleration program like this before. It would have been a lot easier, I guess, to go somewhere and get an off-the-shelf solution, but that would not represent who we are, or would be true to our values, really. So our initial aim was to just create something that would help these individuals really push against those barriers and succeed really in their aspirations and move forward in their careers. I hope that's kind of answered the question.
And I think what's really important as well, just as you were chatting there, one of the things that just kind of struck me was that historically our talent pipeline programs, have been designed by white people.
Yeah.
So therefore, they're not going to be fit for purpose. And part of the work that you've already started to uncover is really understanding what are those true barriers that actually we need to really kind of consider and think about actually in the design of our future kind of talent programs, and ensure that actually we have the right representation for colleagues, to ensure that actually we're creating something that is really inclusive and that is actually going to make a real difference for people. But no, thank you for sharing that. Elaine, I think you might have some thoughts just in terms of any additions that you want to sort of bring to Ruth's comments.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Ruth said. And again, it's, you hear colleagues say, I've been to a conference, I was on a meeting and everyone looked like me, and that's straight, white, male, middle-aged. And to turn things around, we need to speak to our colleagues in our business that are from an ethnic background, who have got that knowledge, know the challenges we face. We know our current policies and procedures don't quite work. So again, the best people to reach out to turn it around are your ethnic minority colleagues. And again, we're co-creating and collaborating on this. So we're not on our own. And I think it's great that Co-op have really pushed for this and are backing it 100%. It's a first that I've ever seen in any organisation, and it doesn't work unless you've got your organisation and your leaders behind it. It's key.
No, thanks, Elaine. Dwight, anything else you want to sort of come to mind or share?
Yeah, look, I think for me, just to probably build on what Rue and Elaine said, I've always been a minority working in a field role, and I think programs like this really kind of support future talent development, but also magnify our role models. And I've been in situations in different businesses where I look around the room and ask myself, who looks like me, and who can I really kind of relate to? And I think probably what we're missing within this program in its entirety is it will really highlight those role models and really kind of pave the way and give people that opportunity that says, you know what, I can relate to that person, and I really want to develop myself further, and that person's done an amazing job. So absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Dwight. That's really helpful. Thank you. And the next question actually is coming to you. So the next theme. So how has it felt to co-create and participate in the first ever sort of iteration of this programme?
Yeah, look, really good question. I think the first point was just making sure that the programme was right for our colleagues, ensuring that it addressed their needs and was aimed at individuals who really wanted to take that next step in their career. This is, in essence, it's all about creating a talent programme that supports diverse talent, who have the drive and really kind of want to progress, but I guess may face some blockers sometimes. I'm really delighted to play a part in this talent programme, and I guess for me it's about how we support and how we shape the programme for future participants. I think what's really kind of important from my perspective is how you kind of really utilise the skills, the knowledge and the thinking that's gained throughout the programme. And I guess also to really kind of create a platform that allows us to give back to the next cohort, and I guess echoing my point previously around becoming a role model. I think that's really important. The program's really stretched my thinking personally, and I guess for me it continues to equip me with the skills I need to reach my career aspirations. You know, I've got career aspirations of being a regional manager, and I think from a development session point of view, I think it's how you turn up to those sessions. And also for me, I think it comes down to the prep and also the reflections after the meeting that really kind of maximize the learning experience. In terms of the mentoring circles, it's always really excited me actually, and you know, it's a great opportunity to learn from various people across the business with varied levels of experiences and expertise, and this really helps you develop a different way of thinking. And for me specifically, it's around, you know, forging those meaningful relationships, you know, whether or not it's personal, professional, or even strategic. But certainly for me, you know, seeing the pilot program move from discussion phase to where it is now is absolutely amazing, and you know, it gives me some real confidence that, you know, whatever we want to achieve is possible.
Great, right, thank you. And we know there's a lot of appetite for it now across the business, isn't there? So as more and more we talk about it, the more excited people get. There's a question that's come in actually on the chat, which sorry Roo, I'm going to do a bit of a left wing question to you, so apologies. But one of the questions is how will we be capturing and measuring the programme's impact and its success? And the reason why I'm asking the question is because I know that's some of the things that we're just talking to now, really. So I just thought it'd be helpful for you to share your thoughts.
Absolutely. I mean, we're currently, it's strange that you've asked that question actually, because we've been holding a number of sort of like mind mapping sessions just to really understand what, you know, as you said, what is the measure of success for programs like this? But as Dwight just sort of like evidently just pointed out, you know, it's changing those mindsets. It's making sure that those individuals really sort of like, you know, understand how to pave their own sort of like ways through their career journeys as well. But it's all coming around with through the actions of like co-creation as well. So I'm not just going to sit there and sort of say, right, we're going to measure our success by doing X, Y, and Z. I'm actually going to, you know, we're going to do that together as a cohort versus people from the project perspective as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of mind maps that we're trying to sort of like understand what does success mean from an organizational perspective, from a cohort perspective, from an individual perspective as well. And that's the kind of approach that I want to take to this, because as we have all said time and time again, it's about the co-creation. It's about making sure that whatever steps we take, we're taking it together, essentially.
Yeah, no, thanks, Roo. Elaine, do you want to come in here and to sort of add and build?
Yeah, I think, again, I've gone to many different programs or developments or, you know, different training. And sometimes you feel like you're the only person in the room. As a Black woman, that's how I felt. I felt like I was at some type of disadvantage, and it could be that imposter syndrome that John mentioned before, but there's still something that wasn't quite there for me. It wasn't enough. And having like-minded people with the same lived experiences makes a big difference. You know, I felt at home, I felt comfortable. I'm in a group of people that I started to learn to know and trust. And each week, you know, you learn something new, and it's not things that you don't know already. But through this program, you're learning things that mentally and emotionally you probably would never have thought about or didn't realize. So it goes really deep into things that help you progress your career and help you think outside the box as well, and gives you that strength, and that it enables you to empower yourself to do more and more that you thought you could do. So no, I think it's great. And like you said, that co-collaboration and that co-creation makes a big difference for the future, you know, the future of our ethnic colleagues in Co-op as well.
No, thanks, Elaine. Thank you. Dwight, is there anything else you want to add? You look thoughtful there.
I think for me, probably just what I'm just reflecting on everything really is, you know, within this program, there's two elements to it. So I think the first one is we can be really kind of selfish to say this is what we want and this is what, you know, this is how we want to progress. I think the other element is how we become more selfless as well. And for me, it's around giving back and just to ensure that we're creating that platform for people to progress. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I think sometimes we get so focused on how can I get that next opportunity or how can I progress, but equally it's around how we pave the way as well. So yeah, just definitely a lot of reflection for me at the moment.
Yeah, and I think just the question that came from the chat around sort of the how we're going to measure the impact, and it's one of those where actually it's so multidimensional that actually we need to come up with a way of being able to take all of those dimensions, I think, into consideration. So it won't necessarily be as straightforward as, you know, how many people have progressed on the back of it, because actually it could be about how people feel. You know, Elaine, you talked to kind of the safe space, the kind of the ability to learn from each other. They're all incredible, you know, kind of, I suppose, impact really that actually you could argue could be a little bit hidden on a sort of a standard program. So we need to think of the ways actually that we are measuring this, and that actually the facets are absolutely multidimensional in terms of those impacts, and not just quite as linear as maybe kind of where we might have been sort of historically sort of in the past. But no, thank you. Elaine, I'm going to come to you next, just in terms of the next theme. So in terms of your aspirations for the future, both personally, but also in terms of your hopes, I suppose, for how the programme can really impact on our co-op and impact on the culture of our co-op moving forward. Just be really interested to get your sort of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think my aspirations for the future is we won't need programs specifically for ethnic minorities in the future to develop their careers or progress their careers. We'll reach the point of finally being able to all be on the same level playing field. And, you know, our colleagues will have a better understanding of tolerance, of different cultures, different religions, and embrace the diversity in our organisation. Just to come off a little bit is that my son's 25 and I've got a daughter who's 9, and you know there's a 15-year gap between them. And I had a conversation with my daughter about race when she first realised something was different, the colour of her skin. But that conversation I had with my 9-year-old, I had with my 25-year-old. So there's that 15-year gap. And sometimes I think to myself, is that just a blink of an eye, or is that a time frame too long? And I could go back even further and say, you know, my parents had the same conversation with me 40 years ago. So I don't want to be in the same position going forward. I want it to be different for my children. I want them to be judged on their strength of character. You know, do they light up a room? You know, how funny they are, not about the colour of their skin. So I don't want us to forget that there's racism or discrimination out there. We still need to keep having those conversations about culture, religion, diversity and inclusion. But we need to have that at home, in the workplace, you know, with our friends and family. The discussion needs to keep going. And again, we need to reach that level playing field. Everything that this programme is giving us is helping us to navigate the challenges we have around racial discrimination, and it gives us a platform to succeed. It's not going to happen overnight, so we have to be, you know, honest with ourselves and say this is just the start, but it's not the end. And Rue mentioned before about that glass ceiling. You know, this program is that sledgehammer. It's going to smash through that glass ceiling, and give everybody, again, that level playing field and the opportunities that we all deserve.
Thanks, Elaine. Thank you. Rue and Dwight, have you got any additional builds?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, like what Elaine just said, just springs to mind some of the sort of, I guess not struggles, but some of the questions asked when we initially sort of like brought this to the table was around, you know, is this a fixed them program? Is this a, you know, do they need fixing before they have to accelerate or before they have to sort of like, you know, and I just wanted to sort of clear that from that perspective and just sort of say it's not a fixed them program. Like as John said earlier on as well, you know how he said about our parents sort of like embedding in us that, you know, we need to sort of like I can't say the words, but I'm going to say BS. Being humble is BS, only because I'm fasting. How being humble is like a lot of BS, and I feel like a lot of the stuff that we've, you know, been taught, been conditioned to think, being conditioned to sort of like almost believe. I wanted this program to almost like, you know, debunk all of that. You know, like Elaine just said, take the hammer and just sort of like smash it with that, because some of the partners that we have collaborated with as well, Rachel, you know, Sharon Amusu, sort of talked about the legacy piece around, you know, what sort of legacy do you want to leave for future cohorts, future colleagues, future generations to come, and that's the sort of like directional sort of lens we've sort of like taken on this program. So yeah, 100%. It's not a fix them, it's a how can we smash that. Yeah,
absolutely, Rue. Thank you. And Dwight?
Yeah, no, I think for me, I've written down a couple of notes. I think the first bit I put down was I want this to be a perception changer. You know, I want the perception to change, and I want minority colleagues to have the confidence to know that they're good enough.
yes.
I think what this program has taught us is we are good enough, but sometimes psychologically and culturally, it does impact us in terms of how confident are we in terms of our journey, and you know, do we go for that net promotion, and do I think I have the right ability? But I do. But sometimes the perception is I may not be good enough to do that. So I think that's the key bit for me, a perception changer. I want to be in a position, and I keep talking about this, but I really want to be in a position where Elaine, Rue, and myself are role models for the next cohort and the next cohort and the next cohort, and they see this as a real kind of catalyst that says, you know, we're really going to shape how we do business in Co-op. But equally, this is going to be a real kind of chain reaction for the whole retail industry. And we're really going to think differently around how we do business in terms of minority and ethnic colleagues. And, you know, I think specifically for me on the program, probably what I've seen is some amazing leaders that may not necessarily realize how good they are. But this program is around giving them that confidence and, you know, allowing them to know that they're good enough and, you know, they can achieve their career aspirations. So perception changer. That's what I'd leave it on.
And just to add to that, Dwight, one of the things that struck me a couple of weeks back, and it was from a pretty sort of senior individual on the cohort, was this bit about actually we don't necessarily want to do a round table with a black or brown leader. You know, we actually want to do it with a white leader because we need to have more confidence in terms of actually being able to talk to a white senior leader about our ideas. And I got taken aback by that because I was kind of like, oh gosh, you know, everybody could do, you know, everybody can have that opportunity to do that. But I think that's what you were saying before about kind of that confidence building and that sort of self-belief that actually, you know, you can do that. And go and, you know, go and have those conversations. But I think it's, you know, it's it is really important to be able to, and I think that's why we were saying it's so important we've co-created it, because it's about what colleagues actually need for their own sort of career progression and their own confidence in terms of sort of being able to sort of move forward. I'm really conscious of time, and I know I'm going to bring John into the conversation at this point, who would be just fascinated just to kind of get some of your builds really, John, from kind of some of the things that we've talked about. And also I think you've got a couple of questions that you also want to put to the panel as well.
So there's lots I want to say. Listen, don't overrate confidence, everybody. Most of the incredibly confident people I know are sociopaths. And so just understand that it's not something it just has to fizz out of you. Elaine, Dwight, Rue, you're already role models, didn't need any work on that. You're going to improve in that capacity as more and more people get visibility of you. This is where we are. In terms of measuring impact, don't you worry, I sit on one of the co-op's boards here, and don't put a social scientist on where you don't want stuff measured. I'm all over that.
We're going to help you, take you up on that offer, John, to help
Absolutely.
us.
Absolutely, I am there. I've written so much down from what you were saying. All of this work is past due. It's 332 days since George Floyd was murdered, but Black people have been in Britain for 1,800 years. It is 107 years since Emily Davison was killed by King George V's horse, attempting to get voting rights for women. Don't allow people to look at the last year or 2 years or 10 years and imagine that the curve is so steep. Aren't we going too fast? Aren't we doing too much? Because it's a hockey stick that's 1,800 years long. I don't think you know, I don't think you know how good you are, and it upsets me. Not just Elaine, Dwight, and Rue, but I'm sure many of you on this call. I can't kind of force you into it, but I would love to be the mirror that you look into and see something different. You're not missing any pieces. Drive, ambition, energy, tenacity, integrity, objective confidence, intelligence, and a willingness to lead. That is what makes a leader. You have that. You have that. How? I want to know what you're going to do to convince yourself of this, so that others, when they look at you, see it beam out. Not as confidence, but just as a quiet certainty. That's my question for Elaine, Dwight, and Rue.
I think I keep reminding myself as to who I represent and what kind of legacy I want to leave behind. That's how I keep reminding myself. And my kids are a big reminder for me. My 2 boys. Yeah.
Second that, Rue. I think I must be doing something right as a single parent that's raising 2 kids that haven't told me what a bad person or a bad parent I am, and that tell me that they love me every day. And obviously, I must be encouraging and lifting them somehow to do that. If they can see that, there's no reason why everybody else in the whole wide world can't see that too. So it's there, you're right.
Yeah, look, I absolutely echo what Elaine and Rue have said. And yeah, lots of reflections for me just in terms of my 3 daughters and my wife and how confident they are about what I do, etc. And yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Loads of reflection.
The thing that I've been told, and we talk about all the time now at APS, is the idea that leadership is not a title and it is not a status. It is a promise that you make of a kind of experience that the people around you can be guaranteed. It's not just you who have to make that promise, but the co-op has made those promises on the website, all those values, all those declarations. The leaders, other leaders in the co-op need to make those same promises, and in the organizations that you're in, they need to make those same, need to keep those promises. Leaders are promise keepers. It sounds like you're already doing that. Your children aren't old enough yet, but one day they will look at you and they will remind you that when you looked at them, the sun shone out of them. They will tell you this.
I'm off mute. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. We've just got a couple of questions just in the chat. I'm really conscious of time because I think people are starting to drop off. And there's lots of comments actually in terms of how great kind of, you know, the work that, you know, kind of you collectively doing sort of in this space, you know, is kind of coming through, and lots of people are really interested in terms of how they can sort of do similar things in their own organizations, which is really brilliant to hear, and obviously a true description of what we would describe as cooperating for a fairer world. So that's brilliant. But there's a specific question around gosh, I'm trying to find them now, sorry. Yeah, direct questions, sorry. Yeah, so there's one question around speaking on senior leadership support and endorsement. What senior leadership board level roles do you have that are focused on this? And the phrase is obviously, if it's middle management, then it falls on the shoulders of people that don't always have the platform, preventing efforts that are being sustainable. And I'm going to answer that question just in terms of kind of, I think, where we are as an organisation. But John, I'd also quite like your builds, obviously, given that you sit on our think tank. So I think it's probably fair to say that our chief exec and our exec board are incredibly bought into what we're trying to achieve kind of in that space, and have, you know, and have absolutely kind of put the money and the budget to enable us to kind of pilot this programme. One of our sort of, you know, chief exec of food is, you know, incredibly kind of passionate about how do we get this out to as many of our colleagues as possible, and we're kind of sort of almost having to sort of hold the reins back a little bit to say it's pilot, we're still trying to learn from it, we're still trying to work out what it looks like for the future, but it's brilliant that actually we've got that much kind of appetite kind of across the organisation. But I think, John, I just wanted to sort of bring you in terms of sort of your experience of, you know, working with Co-op and working with Steve directly, and, you know, and I suppose just kind of, I'm looking for a little bit of reassurance that they're as bought into this as what they say they are. But, you know, you might have a different view.
No, I don't have a different view. I have many bad qualities, but being a person of principle is one of my good ones. And I don't hang around for long if I think people are blowing smoke. So the conversations that I've had with Steve, with others, you've got board representation on the think tank. You've got senior people who attend the think tank, but not in that way that we see people attend, where they turn the camera off and it's very clear that they're actually doing other stuff. The meetings are incredibly robust. I think that's the kind way of saying that we give people hell, and we do, because I think we have to really challenge, because the window for change is closing. The window for being bad at this stuff is closing. And so I'm really confident that with the challenge that we get and the response that we've seen from that challenge, people actually changing, moving, driving new initiatives, we can do something really positive here. I think we have to remember that what we're trying to change is not the Black people, the women, the introverts, the whoever else, the Mancunians, or the people with the wrong accent in the wrong place. That's not what we're changing. We're changing the status quo of what's expected from colleagues and leaders in the way they interact with difference. And there's an education piece to go there. There's a capability and skill piece to go there. There's a motivation piece to go there that'll involve both how you reward people actually and also interpersonally. And then there's an opportunity. The idea that we create opportunity for this change to happen and reward people for it. But I think it's moving along as it should.
Thanks, John. Thank you. So I hope that sort of helps to answer the question that kind of came through on the chat around that sort of senior leadership support. I'm really conscious of time. It's 6:10 and we have run over. But thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Obviously, I've been hopeful that it's been really helpful session for you. It's been interesting for you. And as always, from a co-op perspective, we're very welcoming of conversations with other people if they want to kind of pick our brains on stuff, and we're very welcoming to that. So please do get in touch directly with any members of the team or myself, and we can kind of obviously sort of broker those conversations. So hope that's okay, and all that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to John, a huge thank you to Rue and Elaine and Dwight, and a huge thank you to Jordan and the team at Black Young Professionals for hosting us this evening. It's been an honour really in terms of sort of being part of that, and obviously being asked to sort of share some of the things that we do as part of that. So thank you all so much. Have wonderful evenings. There is still a little bit of sunshine left, so hopefully you might enjoy some of that, and great Friday and a great weekend when it arrives. But thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks, Rachel.
You too,
Thanks,
Rachel.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.